Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's finally time to talk about my favorite books of 2021. I've been hesitating to make this video. I don't know why. When I made my end of the year book tag video, I will link it up above if you haven't watched it yet. I remember saying how I really hadn't found a favorite in 2021. But that was because half of these books I thought I read in 2020. I find that insane. That's just how long 2021 felt, and I know many of you can relate to that. I was just surprised by how many of these were actually 2021 books, and I just did not realize it. I chose 10. We're gonna talk about 10 today, the 10 that really stood out for me this year. I am gonna pick my favorite of the year for the #1 spot, but the other 9 are really all loves of mine. There's not one that I loved more than the other. They just were all standouts for me. I want to start off with a little series. I included all 3 from the series, all 3 volumes of the series. It is a graphic novel, and I just could not pick one because this was the overall story that I liked. I loved all 3 volumes exactly the same. I felt like they all 3 had the same amount of input. You know, sometimes in series, the middle book just doesn't, but in graphic novels, that's just not how it is. In graphic novels, I feel like the whole thing encompasses the whole story, and each volume has its own significance, its own input into the story. I'm talking about Sweet Tooth. I absolutely loved these graphic novels this year. This is all an apocalyptic graphic novel. The kids are all starting to be born as animal-human hybrids, and they are just trying to find out where it all started, how this all started, and we're going back in time into scientific research and things like that. I just absolutely love this. Our main character is Sweet Tooth, whose actual name is Gus, and he is just the best character ever. He is just amazing. I loved everything about him, and all the characters in this are amazing. The artwork is exceptional, and I just needed to mention these because they really were a standout read for me this year. The next book I'm going to talk about is not a favorite of everybody's. I am in the minority when I talk about this book, but it was a book that I read in January. It was one of the first books that I read. I read Snow as my first book of the year, and then I read this one. It was an ARC that I had received, and when I started reading this book, it just overtook my whole entire life, and I read it within 24 hours and I was obsessed, and that is The Project by Courtney Summers. This is a cult related book, and I just ate it up. I never realized how much I love cult books. They are just some of my favorites. I just finished one literally like 5 minutes ago that's also a cult book, and I'm obsessed with it. So here we are following our main character, and her parents are dead, and her sister, she wakes up from this coma, and her sister has joined this cult. It's called the Unity Project, and she goes in search of her sister. She goes diving in deep into this cult. She has been trying to reach her sister, but her sister just stopped all communications with her, and so she's a journalist, and she is saying that she's gonna write this column on the Unity Project, and she gets close to the leader of the cult. And so it's just her trying to find her sister and talk to her sister, and she's also trying to infiltrate this cult to see what's going on in there, because the Unity Project is known as this very positive community that just helps out, and they are very well loved in the community. And so she wants to find out if this is all true or if this is fake. And so I just loved this. I love the characters. I love the storylines. There's some sceneries in here that really appealed to me. There's this one scene where she's in this room that is all like windows, and it's winter outside, and there's this winter storm, and I just ate it up. But again, mine is a very unpopular opinion. I know a lot of people did not like this book, but for some reason, it really did it for me. Next is a thriller that I was so wowed by. I really went into it not knowing a lot about it. I know that a few of my friends loved it as well, but when I picked up the book, I picked it up on a whim because I found the audiobook, and I really hadn't heard a lot of people talking about it. When I go into a book, I try not to read reviews, or if I know that I want to read a book eventually, I don't listen or read reviews for that specific book. If somebody talks about it on their channel, I'll fast forward it just because I like to go into my books blind, and so hearing or seeing somebody talk about it just almost ruins it a little bit for me, because people tend to talk about synopses. I mean, that's the point of reviewing a book or talking about a book on a channel. You're gonna talk about what the book is about in synopsis. So I try to not listen whenever somebody talks about a book that I really want to read. But this one I didn't know anything about. All I knew is that there was a mother and a child in it, and that's it. I didn't know the overall plot point or just the story in itself, and that is The Push by Ashley Audrain. What a book. Now this book, throughout the whole entire book, it's not anything fantastic. You're following the story. It's great. It's a thriller, fine. It's thrilling. But it's not until the end that it just really did something for me.
That's going to be the theme of this favorites. It did something for me.
Here we're following this mother, this wife, or she's a wife at the beginning, and she's talking about her relationship with her husband, how great it was, how fantastic, but he wants to have a baby and she's not so sure about it, because just the history within her family with mothers is not so great. She didn't have a great relationship with her mom. And at the same time, we're following a backstory of another messed up relationship between a mother and a daughter and a family altogether. And so we're following these two storylines. You know that somehow they might connect, but you don't know how they connect, obviously. And so back to this main character of ours. Finally, she agrees she's gonna have a baby with her husband. They get pregnant, they end up having a little girl, but this mom never really gets a connection with this girl. She just sees something weird in her daughter. Her husband is just telling her, give it time, you'll make a connection, you'll bond. She's not so sure, and she starts noticing weird things again. But her husband just doesn't want to believe her. He's like, there's like little instances with other kids at school or at the playground, and she just thinks that her daughter is just evil. But her husband just doesn't want to believe it. His little girl is like the love of his life, the apple of his eye. And so he's just like, you're making things up. You need to let this go. He just does not support her or agree with her. Then they have a little boy, and it's her whole entire life. She has a bond with this little boy. It's her love. There's an accident that happens and her son dies, and the story just goes from there, and you're just really trying to find out if this mom is just not right in her head and is seeing things, or if this little girl truly is evil and bad. This was a real wild ride, but for me, the story really didn't come together until the end. The ending to me just... it solidified the whole thing for me. It was an unforgettable ending. Usually when I read books, I tend to, even if I love them, I tend to forget something about them. Either the ending, usually it's the ending, or how a story wrapped up, or just somewhere along the lines, you tend to forget details. But this is a book that I will never forget that ending, because I feel like it solidified the whole entire story for me. It was satisfying AF for me. It was so satisfying, and it just made me smile. I know that's messed up, but if you've read this book, you know it was absolutely fantastic. And again, it's an unforgettable read.
Oh my gosh, I just realized I didn't have my favorite author on here.
Next, we're going to talk about a book that just wowed me. It was a huge surprise for me. I didn't think I was going to love it as much as I did, but because of this book, this author has become a favorite for me, and I've only read 2 of his books, and he's already a favorite of mine. I'm talking about Brian King with the Conqueror Worms. I'm forever going to be grateful to my friend Callie for putting this book on my radar. I was commenting on something about a certain mythological creature, and she had told me, she goes, you might want to read the Conqueror Worms because there might or might not be this specific creature in there. And so I said, what the hell? I found it, I read it, and wow, I loved it so much. Now, I've spoken about this before. When it comes to supernatural creatures in horror, I don't tend to love it so much. Obviously, by the Conqueror Worms, you can tell that it's going to have some sort of worm. It's so hard for me to say this title too, Conqueror Worms. And I was like, you know, I picked it up and I was gonna read it because of this creature, this said creature that my friend said was in this book. But I was like, I don't think I'm really gonna like it because of the worms aspect of it. So, I mean, I gave it a try either way, but this is an apocalyptic book. So I should have known. I love apocalyptic novels. Apocalyptic horror novels are the best, in my opinion. I love them. And this gave me everything I needed and more. Here we're following Teddy, and he is an older man. You know that he lives on this mountain and his wife has passed away, and there is this sort of apocalyptic event going on where the waters keep rising and rising and rising and rising and rising. Luckily, he lives on a mountain, but pretty soon that mountain is going to be overrun with water because, again, the whole world is being covered in water. And so it's just the story of him trying to survive the apocalypse by himself. Everybody has evacuated this mountain, so he feels like he's alone. And there are these worms that start coming out of the ground, these huge worms that just feel like earthquakes when they're coming out. And so it's just him trying to survive. There are other characters involved. He does feel like he is the last man on this mountain, but it just so happens that he is not. I will say though that although I did love this book, there's a part in here where we are following another storyline from another set of characters that ends up coming into the book unexpectedly. I did not like that storyline, and in that storyline is where we're talking about these creatures that I was excited to read this book about. So it was pretty surprising to me that I didn't like the portion that I initially got me to read the book because of these creatures. I don't want to say too much because it's I don't want to spoil it, and this is just a book that you should go in and just, if you like apocalyptic novels, then you should just go into this blind because it is a pretty fun ride. But again, that portion of the story I did not like. I thought it was a little bit out there, more out there than the worms. But either way, I loved it. It made it into my favorites. This is one of those books that felt like I read in 2020. That's why I was so surprised, and it made me so happy that I was going to talk about this book for 2021 because it felt like I read it 2 or 3 years ago. Of how long 2021 felt. My God, I think I read this in either February or March of this year. And again, I thought I read it ages ago. So, I mean, this was a really big surprise and a really big love for me in 2021. This summer, I read my first Joe R. Lansdale book, and I absolutely loved it. And that was Edge of Dark Water. It made my favorites because this was such a fantastic journey with the characters, with the world. It was just amazing. This is a perfect summer horror read. I'm going to be making a video. I know that this past year, it's been a rough one, and I usually like to make seasonal horror recommendations video, and I feel like in 2021, I made 0. Hopefully 2022 is better, but let's not say that. Here we're following Sue Ellen. I always get all these names confused because they're so southern, but here we're following Sue Ellen, and she is on a quest to unbury her friend Mary Ellen and take her to Hollywood because Mary Ellen's dream was always to be a grand superstar in Hollywood, and Sue Ellen feels like she could have made it. But unfortunately, one day Mary Ellen is found dead at the bottom of this lake. Her family actually finds her. The quest starts from there. This journey starts from there. She gets this bright idea that she wants to unbury her friend along with her friends Terry and Jinx. And they're going to take her to Hollywood because she feels like that's where she belongs. And it's this whole journey of her with her friends and her mother. There's this whole backstory with her mother that I thought just made it, added the touch to the story that it needed. It gave it the emotions that it needed, and it was just a perfect addition. But along with her mother and her friends, they end up trekking along to take her friend to Hollywood. And obviously this is a horror novel, so there is a bad man on the loose that is tracking, because along the way they have stolen some money and they sent off this really bad man after them to collect this money and basically kill them all. I just got immersed in the story so much, and the characters are amazing. Like I said, the backstory between Sue Ellen and the mom is just incredible. I found this just endearing, emotional, creepy, and hard-hitting all at once. A really big standout for me for 2021. Let's talk about The Last House on Needless Street because I'm just gonna touch briefly on this because I know you've heard about this. I know you've heard everybody say this. This is just a book that you can't talk a lot about, or about a lot.
I don't know which one sounds better. Take your pick.
But this was phenomenal. I loved this book so much. It was so well done, so well written. It was a wild ride. This is just about a house. The last house on Needless Street. And in this house, 3 people live there, or a family of 3. Let's say there's a man, a little girl, and a cat. And we get the point of view from the cat, which is the best thing ever. And we have a new neighbor that moves into the house next door. This lady that moves into the house next door, her sister went missing when she was little. And she's gone down and tracked every person that could have had some sort of dealing with her sister when they were little. And so she's on this journey and she ends up at the house next to the last house on Needless Street, and then the story wraps up there. The story goes from there. It was so fantastic. Again, I loved all the characters. I loved the plot. I loved the journey. It was just amazing, and everybody is talking about this book for a reason. I know some of us just don't like to read hyped books because they can be disappointing at times, but this is one that I highly recommend you go into. If you want to wait a little bit till all of this dies down and then maybe go into it, fine, but don't waste time. I had an arc of this since March of 2021 and I did not read it until October. I don't know why I was hesitating. This is just one of those books that you have a good feeling about, but you're hesitant because of that good feeling. Well, I kicked myself in the ass and I wish I would have read this back in March like I was supposed to. Fantastic book. So while I was editing, I realized that I forgot to mention a book. So I was about to upload a video that only had 9 of my favorite books of 2021. And it was funny because I was sitting yesterday. I had already my video ready to go for today. I just had to do a couple of things, and I was sitting down and I thought about a book, and I'm like, and which in turn made me think about the author, which in turn made me think about one of my favorite books of 2021 that I did not talk about. Because I read it as an ebook, it wasn't on my stack of physical books, and that goes to show that when a Virgo doesn't make lists, things don't work out. I did not make a list of my favorite books of 2021, and so I missed a book, so I'm here to talk about it now. I'm gonna insert it in this little spot before we get down to my 3 favorite books of the year. I thought it would be the perfect spot to input. Editing Marcella. Let's talk about the book that I missed of my favorites of 2021. Now this book is a little controversial, you guys. It's a little toxic, it's a little wrong, or maybe not a little wrong, but a lot of wrong. And I'm talking about Credence by Penelope Douglas. I read 2 Penelope Douglas books in 2021 and I loved them both. I've tried a lot of new things in 2021 as far as my reading goes, and it makes me so happy. I started off with Punk 57. It was just one of these days where I just was not in the mood to read anything on my shelves. I was not in the mood to read anything that I was reading. I think I was in the middle of 5 to 6 books, as is my usual, and I was going through Kindle Unlimited and just Punk 57 stood out to me. Punk 57 is a book that I've been wanting to read for a really long time, and I just never got around to it, and it started making a resurgence in the book community, and I think specifically in Book Talk, and I became obsessed with that book, which caused me to then go into Credence. Credence was another one that I've been eyeing for a really long time, and I heard how wrong it was and how messed up it was. So I went into it kind of like thinking nothing is gonna top Punk 57 for me. Boy, was I wrong. Now Credence is not a perfect book. It's not. It is not gonna be for everyone. So please, if you read the trigger warnings on other people's reviews and stuff, and it just sounds something that it's not gonna be for you, then don't read it. I mean, just don't even try it. This is fiction, you guys, and I hate when I watch a video of somebody that's gonna talk about something like Credence or a book in those veins, and they have to specify how they don't condone this in real life, and And it's like, it's fiction, you guys. I read fiction to read about fiction, about things that I would not be okay with in the real world, but it's a book. This is just one of those books that is just all types of wrong. Here we are following our main character, and she has just gone through a tragedy in her life. Both of her parents have committed suicide. They were really, really in love with each other, and one of them finds out that they are terminally ill, and they just decide to, both of them, just go off together. And she has always felt, the daughter has always felt, that she just came in like the back burner. She had a nanny. Her two parents were very wealthy. Her mom was an actress, a superstar, and so she always felt like she was never part of their relationship because they were so into each other, and she was just like there as an accessory, like, okay, that's our daughter. She had a nanny, and the only love she ever felt was from her nanny. So her parents decide to go off together, and so she stays alone, and she's trying to just deal with all of this, with like the rejection that she's felt all her life, and then feeling all these feelings of them being gone and not knowing really how to grieve that, because, you know, she's basically been grieving her whole life of not having her parents there within, you know, the love aspect of it. And so she gets contacted by her uncle. She's never heard of her uncle before. Her parents never talked about her uncle. And so they tell her, if you want to come up here, and to sort of like figure out what you want to do with your life, I'm here for you. I know you don't know me, but I'm just offering a helping hand, you know, as family. And so she thinks about it, and she decides to take him up on the offer, and she goes to stay with them. They live in Colorado, and they live on this mountain peak, very mountain life, and it's him and his two sons. He's not really her blood uncle. He is the stepbrother, or I think stepbrother, to her dad. There's not blood relation there, but they're still family. And so she ends up going, and they keep saying how winter is coming, winter is coming. And what happens is when it starts snowing up in the mountains, like, they're locked there. They're stuck there for 3 months of the year. And so they keep telling her like, hey, it's, if you want to go, whatever, we'll respect your decision. But this is what happens. You're gonna be stuck in here for 3 months with us in the winter, and things happen after that. There is an age issue here that we're talking about as well. She is 17 when the book starts, but by the time that winter hits, she has turned 18. But things happen in the house during the winter time and during their lockdown time. And anyways, it's all kinds of wrongs. I get that, but I just loved this book so much. Like I already said, it's not a perfect book. It is not. I felt like this book probably could have been 100 to 150 pages shorter, and it would have been perfect. Another thing that I wish we would have seen more, that I was more interested in that very dark subject of her parents. I do realize that if we would have gotten more of the parents' situation and more of that story, it wouldn't have been a book about what it was about, so it would have deviated completely. But I almost want to see another story focused on the parents and their love and their just obsession with each other. It's something that really, really stood out to me. And again, I wish I would have gotten more of. I will say though that Punk 57 came in at a close second for this spot, and I almost chose Punk 57. And although Punk 57 to me was much better as far as in book size, writing, topic, subject, everything, it was much better than Credence and much more acceptable than Credence. Credence just took my heart. It made it onto my favorites of 2021. I love this book so much, and it's a book that I see myself revisiting in the future. We're down to the last 3 books, and even though this video was in no particular order, I mean, these were all favorites for XYZ reason, I am going to leave the one that stood out to me the most this whole entire year for the #1 spot. Which one do I want to talk about next? Let's talk about people we meet on vacation. This is the 2nd year in a row that Emily Henry ends up in my favorites of the year, and I just have a feeling that she is going to be in every favorites every year from here on out if she takes out a book every year. I know she's coming out with another one for this year that I am super excited about and I cannot wait to read. Emily Henry just knows how to write relationships and banter and friendships. Each time I read one of her books, she just leaves me swooning with her characters. I read this back in June, maybe March. I mean, earlier on this year. All I know is that all I can remember is that there are these friends and they go on a vacation every summer. She lives in New York. He lives in a small town. I can't remember exactly where, but they meet every summer and they take one summer trip until one year something happens between them on one of these trips and they stop talking. And so a couple years go by and Poppy has the opportunity to go on a trip for work, and she just puts down her stubbornness and she calls Alex and she's like, hey, look, let's take one more trip together. We haven't spoken in a few years. I miss you. Let's take this trip. And so he agrees. And the story develops from there. It is a friends to lovers book. I loved each of their personalities, their characters. Alex, just like Beach Read with, I forgot his name. I love them both equally from both of her books, and the heroines I love as well. She just, again, she just knows how to write relationships and characters. She's great at characters. I'm just really looking forward to everything else that she writes. Emily Henry has become a favorite author of mine. Everything that she writes is just ace, and she can do no wrong in my eyes. Like in Beach Read and People We Meet on Vacation, there's not one flaw in this book. I don't care what anybody says. You can have a million flaws. That's fine for you. But for me, she can do no wrong. I love it. And I'm so eager to see what she writes in 2022. All right, next one I'm going to talk about, I just spoke about in my December wrap up, and that is The Keeper of Night. What a fantastic book. I loved this so much. This is a Japanese mythology novel. Here we're following Ren. She lives in London and she is a reaper. She basically collects souls when their time is up to die. They have this watch where they manipulate time to be able to do what they have to do without being seen. But she also has another power within her. Her mom is Japanese and was a Shinigami. And Ren has this power of the Shinigamis, which is a big no-no in London where she is at, and they find her out. They find out that she has this power and they're looking for her to kill her. Ren is able to escape along with her little half brother, and they make it to Japan because she wants to find her mom. She wants to know why her mom let her dad take her away from her, and she just wants to be somebody in Japan. She wants to use her Shinigami powers. When she gets to Japan, she knows that she has to go talk to the goddess of death so that she can get info on her mom because she doesn't know where else to go. And getting to know or getting to see the goddess of death within the pages of this book was so amazing. When Ren was before the goddess of death, oh my gosh, that was amazing. Seeing the Japanese mythology in this book of the underworld, I mean, just stole my heart. I did not know anything about this topic, and it just wowed me so much reading about it, and it opened this interest up in me to read more on it and to research it more. This left me on such a cliffhanger, and it left me with a broken heart because something happens and it just crushes your soul. If you've read this book, let's talk about it in the comments without spoilers, please. Or if you want to message me if you've read this book, because I haven't seen a lot of people read it or a lot of my friends read it. So I need to talk about this book with somebody because that ending just left me dead. And for this to have been a debut novel, I keep saying this, wow, because I said it in my December wrap up how I feel like Kylie Lee Baker has been writing her whole entire life, and this was just a masterpiece in my opinion, and I cannot wait for book 2. We have come to the last and final book in my favorites of 2021, and I want to say first of all that it's the whole entire series I'm talking about. It's all 4 books in the series. If you can guess what my favorite book of the year was, maybe put it down in the comments what you think it's gonna be. I spoke about the series in my wrap-up video, I think it was in November, And I read the whole entire series, the whole 4-book series in November, and it was a series that floored me, wowed me, wooed me, swoons me, stole my heart, made me cry so much. Each book except book 1. I think that book 1 was my least favorite of it all, but I still love it because it was the introduction to the world that I needed. And yeah, without further ado, The Rules of Magic by Alice Hoffman. I was so surprised in 2021 towards the ending of the year. I have read some books that just I did not know that I would love as much as I have. I talk about The Lost Apothecary in my December wrap up and how I just came to realize in 2021 how much I love historical fantasy, witchy historical fantasy to be exact. There's not enough good things that I can say about this. I picked this one in specific out of the 4 of them because it was just the one that ripped my heart out the most. Here in this book, we follow the aunts of book 1 and their backstory and how we get to where we are in practical magic. And I just found their story to be so engrossing and so amazing. And we do see them throughout the rest of the series, but this one focuses just on them. I've realized that Franny is my favorite character in the whole entire series, and she's the one that I felt most meh about in practical magic. She's the most stern one, the one that's more practical out of all of them, the one that acts more on instinct and not her heart. But I just grew to love her so much, and her storyline and what she went through just breaks my heart. I mean, the whole of the Owens family goes through things because they are cursed in love, and the whole series is just trying to find a way to break that curse because each one of them, whenever they fall in love, tragedy happens after that. And so they want to break this curse because they want to love. That's what they want to do the most. And so it was just, oh my gosh, I could sit here and talk for hours and hours and hours about these books, about the characters, about the storylines, about how they break your heart, but they give you hope at the same time. These books made me smile. They made me cry. They made me just feel every emotion imaginable to the human body. So I want to read more from Alice Hoffman, but at this point, I think I'm going to wait a while because I really loved her writing. But I feel like the Owens family has overtaken such a big part of my heart that I won't be able to connect with the rest of her books as much as I have with these. I could be wrong because her writing is so incredible again, but it's just the Owens family will always have a special place in my heart. Oh my gosh, this one, I loved it so much. So that's it, you guys. Those are all my favorite books of 2021. Let me know if you've read any of these. Let me know what your favorite books of 2021 were. Let's chat books in the comment section down below. Just FYI, I will not be making a worst books of 2021. To me, that is just, I don't know, labeling something the worst books to something that is so subjective to each individual person is so weird to me. Sometimes when we label something the worst books, it deters somebody else from reading them. And so I never want to do that to somebody because something that I did not like could be somebody else's favorite book of the year. And thinking or even feeling that I have stopped somebody from reading a book just because I labeled it the worst book of the year. I don't know, I can't wrap my mind around that. I know many people do worst books. I watch them all the time. Seeing somebody put a worst book in their list doesn't stop me from reading it, but I know that it does a lot of other people. So I don't want to do those videos. I never have done a worst books of the year. I'm considering doing a most disappointing books of the year. I don't know that I have a long enough list to do that, but we'll see. Don't hold me to it. I haven't kept track very much in 2021 of my DNFs or my most disappointing books. So again, I don't know that I have enough books to do a whole entire video on that. But that's it, you guys. That is everything for this video. All these books will be linked in the description bar down below if you're interested in any of them. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in my next one. Bye.